don't really know where to start with that game. We're seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly from both teams. So let's start with the starting 11. So we're going to be reviewing Newcastle against Brighton and what was a frustrating but entertaining FA Cup clash. It was a proper cup tie. Both teams showed respect to the competition as well as each other. They both fielded a strong side, which I loved. And what else I loved is Lewis Miley, a product of the Newcastle Academy, and Jack Hinzelwood, a product of the Brighton Academy, 18 years old, 19 years old, both starting in midfield in what is a huge FA Cup game. That's just amazing. They both joined the club at the age of 7, progressed through their ranks, and it's just good to see two academy products battling out on the pitch. But let's start with Brighton because personally I thought Brighton were the better team. We need to give Brighton their kudos because they are an exceptional football team. Brighton come to play. And I think to make a good game, yes, there was a lack of quality in the final third, but both teams need to take part. And Brighton have a wonderful blend of technical ability and physicality so they can compete with Newcastle, whichever way the game's going. They knock the ball around extremely well, and this is why it was an open game at times. And I can't lie, I think Brighton had the upper hand throughout the 90 minutes. They looked more comfortable in possession, in my opinion. Thought Newcastle were struggling, trying to feel out what Brighton were trying to do. And Brighton's movement in the final third caused Newcastle so much problems. It was kind of like quality but organized chaos that we're doing. Mitoma was moving inside, which he doesn't normally do, and this created overloads and exploited space in behind Newcastle's midfield, and we struggled to react or rectify this problem. So what Brighton were doing in possession, we're creating a 3-2-2-3 shape, and this allowed them to have a numerical advantage in midfield, and I just thought it was insane because it's not something Brighton normally do. Normally they have Mitoma acting as a touchline winger. If you look at his heat map in comparison to this game against Chelsea, it's completely different. So I need to be honest with you guys, I loved everything about Brighton tactically today. So what they were doing is they were creating a box shape in midfield, so they would have Carlos Baleba and Jack Hinzelwood just sitting as a double pivot. Then they would have Jorginho Rute and Mitoma just creating a box shape, and this was literally putting 4 against 3. So they always had that extra man, they always had that extra pass, and it was causing so many problems. But what else was causing problems is João Pedro's movement. His movement is exceptional. He was dropping short, and this was unbalanced in our defence because Fabian Shaw and Dan Burn at times, which is where their goal came from, was following him in the midfield. This was creating space for midfielders and wingers to run onto, and this was happening time and time again, and eventually that's where their goal come from. And I just thought because of the way Brighton set up tactically, it made us uncomfortable with our own formation. We couldn't find any rhythm into the games. The midfielders were being sloppy, they didn't know who to pick up, and it just wasn't clicking for us, and I put that down to Brighton being excellent in their tactical setup rather than Newcastle being extremely poor, even though we were. Then Newcastle did get the rub of the green by earning a penalty, and it was incredibly dispatched by Isak. But what is Minter doing? He doesn't need to put a challenge in there because the ball's gone. The ball's absolutely gone. He did not need to put a challenge in. First of all, he was wrong side of Livramento, and then he just puts in an unnecessary challenge. I would be incredibly frustrated if I was a Brighton fan. And then Isak does what he does best, dispatch the penalty in spectacular fashion, and I thought Isak was our only shining light today. But I definitely thought that penalty was going to wake Newcastle up. I thought we were going to step it up again. It just didn't go that way. I thought both teams looked okay. Brighton were getting the better and were moving the ball more comfortably, but again Newcastle just couldn't get into the game, and I really did think Brighton's goal was coming, not because they were creating loads of chances, because there weren't clear-cut chances, but the space that was being left in our defence. I just knew there was going to be a time where they did break through. Just time and time again, our structure, our press was so easy to break through. Technically, Brighton were far superior. Their movement was far superior. And I spoke about the importance of them vertical passing in midfield in my match preview. We allowed Brighton to do that consistently throughout the game. I thought that was the one thing we're going to stop. Because if you stop that, you kind of stop Brighton. But we didn't look at that. But if we're looking at our setup, I thought Harvey Barnes on the right wing just doesn't work. He's just can't get into the game at all. There was a lack of intensity from our general overall play. There was no aggression. There was no tenacity off the ball. Tactically, Brighton were excellent, and I put that down to Brighton being excellent. Newcastle was sloppy, we couldn't get into the game, and we're kind of like the failures of our own downfall at times. Having said that, We had our moments. Willock should have scored a header in the second half. So despite us being absolutely rotten in our defence getting pulled to pieces, we're stuck in the game. We did have our chances, but so did Brighton. I think on another day, if Brighton were more clinical in the final third, they could have been 2 or 3 ahead. And that's because the counter-attack was always on for them. And that was looking more and more obvious as the game went on. So I'm kind of glad Eddie Howe made the 3 changes when he didn't. I think they were the right changes. I think Miley wasn't having his best of games, so Bruno needed to come on, etc. But let's talk about that Anthony Gordon situation, because what an idiot he is. A moment of seeing red is now put him out the cup final. Like, what is he doing? The moment you raise your hands to somebody, whether that be a punch, a slap, or just a slight touch, you're going to see red. You can't raise your hands on the football pitch. And he, for anybody, should know this. Like, I literally have no words for that red card, because it's not like he mistimed a challenge. He literally had a moment of madness. What a stupid idiot. But that final 5 minutes of that game was chaos. Anthony Gordon getting sent off, and then Brighton having a player sent off, and then Fabian Shaw scoring in the dying minutes. And you just thought Newcastle had got away with murder. I thought we're second best everything today. Everything tactically, in possession, out of possession. We're just so sloppy, lackluster. We just weren't ourselves. And to be honest, since the Wolves game, I kind of think of many times where Newcastle have been excellent throughout the full 90 minutes. We've had moments during 90 minutes, but for a full 90 minutes where we've dominated games since that Wolves game, I really can't think of anything. So let us know in the comments below. But I want to speak about a few individual players as well. And Alexander Isak, 22 goals in 31 games this season for Newcastle United in all competitions. Newcastle are instantly better with him in the side. He's a natural finisher, and his movement is absolutely world class. And he links up play. He's a complete striker you want in your team, and there's no surprise that Eddie Howe is building a team around him because he's that good. His ability to create space, exploit space, just literally unbalance Brighton's defence, and he's brilliant outlet and transition for Newcastle United. His trouble in our trouble today, he was our only threatening player today. His problem today on the football pitch is there was no quality or backup behind him, and I kind of feel sorry for him because he looked sharp, he looked hungry, he looked full of life. He was trying to make things happen, but he just had no support. And I want to speak about Fabian Shaw and Dan Burn today because their decision making was absolutely a joke. Both getting pulled apart from João Pedro's movement. Like I mentioned earlier, João Pedro dropping deep to pull one of them with them, and they were making the wrong decisions. They were stepping out at the wrong time. There was like 5 or 6 moments in the first half where it was Fabian Shaw pulling out, going with João Pedro, and it was just creating so much space in behind. And then the one time Dan Burn done it, he stepped out with João Pedro, Minter got through, and Brighton scored. It was gonna come, and the failure to rectify that or understand that tactically amazes me. I don't know if it was just me, but our defence looked slow, we looked asleep, we had a lack of concentration, we lacked pace, and we never once seemed comfortable or composed. And this is why I think the sooner Sven Botman comes back, the better, because I generally believe tactically and ability-wise, he's our best defender. Then the final thing I want to talk about before we get on the end of the game is our midfield. I love Lewis Miley, but he was off it today. He was not tracking runners. He was taking that extra split second in possession that was needed, and he was being sloppy. And the one thing Lewis Miley normally brings is quality in possession. Usually it's just one touch, give and goes. But today he was just taking that extra touch, overthinking things, and it was just generally making him play poor. Then you've got Tonali, who just wasn't his usual self. Joe Linton looked like he lacked match sharpness. And I just thought all three collectively were not tracking runners, allowing players to get on the blind side, and being completely overrun in midfield. We weren't getting tight enough, we were making the wrong decisions in possession, and I just thought Brighton's box shape that they were creating in the middle really confused our structure today. And I think the players were kind of looking at Eddie Howe and thinking, let's address this, but Eddie Howe didn't. And there is 2 Brighton players that I want to talk about before we get on extra time, and that's Jack Hinzelwood and Jan-Paul van Heckel. I thought they were both brilliant today and both clear for Man of the Match award in my opinion. I thought both of them equally were super composed in possession, excellent ball retention and tight spaces, especially Jack Hinzelwood, and they were making the right decisions when to release the ball and where to release the ball. Involved in everything good about Brighton today, both of them on and off the ball. Well-rounded performances. They had clever positioning. Jack Hinzelwood especially was always making himself an option in possession. Technically comfortable, but they were both combative out of possession. They were tackling, blocking lines, making interceptions and working hard. And then you had Paul Van Heck, who was reading the game well, covering in wide areas when he needed to. I just thought it was a really tremendous performance from both of them. And then extra time started. Brighton, the better side in the first half of extra time. They created a few chances. Then Newcastle suddenly just woke up and were looking the better side in the second half of extra time. But guess what? Danny Welbeck does what Danny Welbeck does. Scores at St James's Park. He scored the match winner at the beginning of the season when Brighton won 1-0, and he's just scored the winner again. Danny Welbeck, stop it. So to conclude, I think Brighton deserved their win today. I thought it would have been injustice if Newcastle had went through. Good luck, Brighton, for the rest of the tournament. I actually hope you kind of win it, to be honest, because I like what you do as a football club. So good luck to Brighton. Newcastle, back to the drawing boards, because we weren't even doing the basics today. But if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on another episode. And I will be doing more Newcastle United content. So make sure you hit that like button. But also, away the lads.